One, and we are on.
We're on. Hey there, Randy. My name is Kaz. Currently in the Royal Canadian Navy down in Victoria, BC. And I had some, thank you for taking the time to talk to me about this because I had some questions with your background and experience in the whole Canadian military. Um, these are some questions my peers have asked, and I think it would help a lot of people.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks for taking the time, Kazra. I know for the viewers that are watching, Kazra and I have known each other for almost a year now. We started to work together doing some online consultation stuff about a year ago. And actually, not too long ago, just before Christmas, Kazra made his way out to the Ontario region to do some training with me. So he actually flew out from BC, trained with me for 4 consecutive days, where we covered some stuff on the mat, some stuff on the range. We got to know each other a little bit, and you can imagine you spend almost 4 straight days with somebody. You get to know them a little bit, what their character is like, what their values, morals, and ethics are like. And throughout those 4 days, Kazra had some great questions that he found, not just interesting for himself, but we also discussed about how there are other people that have very similar like questions. And we thought, well, why not capture this in a recorded form where we can address some of those questions that Kazra has, but also some of the questions that we think this might help others as well. So thanks for doing this, Kazra. Thanks for putting it together. And just for the record, I have no idea what Kazra is going to ask me, so this is going to remain authentic. And we'll just see where the conversation goes and see how things unfold. So thanks for tuning in, guys. And whenever you're ready, Kazra, we can have a casual conversation about anything that you like to talk about.
Awesome. Let's start from the beginning. I think it's a good idea, like to understand like your background. Like, so where do you come from? Where were you born? What was childhood like? Just the beginning from the ground zero.
Sure. So I was born and raised in Halifax, Nova Scotia. I was brought up in Halifax, and then all my extended family were from a place called Cape Breton, which is about a 5-hour drive from Halifax. So all my extended aunts and uncles and whatnot were from the Cape Breton area. I do have some cousins and stuff and some extended family that are in Halifax, but yeah, that's where I grew up. That's where I did all of my schooling, and that's where I graduated high school before joining the Canadian Armed Forces.
So my second question would be, what drew you towards the Canadian Forces? Was it like family members? What was it that you were like, okay, I'm gonna go towards the armed forces?
Sure. So when I graduated high school, I didn't have really very good grades, to be completely honest. So there was a year after I graduated where in the East Coast we have the opportunity to go back for kind of like a makeup year to improve the scores and improve your abilities to achieve university status if you want to go to university. So I went back for that additional year and basically repeated grade 12 again to kind of up my marks, and with the thought process of maybe getting into a university. And while I was doing that, I knew deep down I didn't want to go to university. I just thought that it was the proper thing to do, not necessarily because of any other reason than I was just trying to figure things out. And luckily, my uncle at the time, who was in the Navy, he did 35 years in the Navy. He kind of took me under his wing, brought me to the local recruiting center, and gave me an opportunity to see what other options are out there in terms of a life in the military. So he brought me there, showed me around a little bit to what he was doing. So his trade at the time was a hall technician. I believe now it falls under a different trade name now, where it's an engineer position, I believe. But he was a hall technician. Took me around his world and what he does day to day, and I thought that was really neat. There was a lot of cool stuff that they had an opportunity to learn how to do, and I thought, yeah, you know what, I could see myself doing this. So he dropped the initial seed in the military to have me believe, or at least have me thinking about the Navy big time. So when I wrote my aptitude test to get into the military, I think my first choice was Hall Tech. My second choice was infantry, and then my third choice was bosun or something of that nature. And my scores were not high enough for Hall Tech. So it just so happened I fell into the realm of going to the infantry, and I was happy to do so. When I decided to say, yeah, I'm all in, I jumped in with both feet. I'm joining the military. I'm joining the infantry. I then went to basic training in Saint Jean Richelieu in Quebec, and that's where I spent the first 10 weeks of my military career was in Saint Jean, and that's where things kind of got started.
Yeah. Oh man, that was so good too. God damn it.
Yeah, that's
All
all
right.
right. We'll keep
We can,
going. A technical
we can
glitch, and then
attach it. Yeah, we can attach it. Yeah.
what I'll do is just put the two together. Yeah, it's all good.
Keep going. Yeah.
All right, so we're still recording, and I'll just edit it. So yeah, I'll just finish that off. So yeah, that's where so from that point, joined the infantry and went to Saint Jean for basic training, and then from basic training went to Wainwright, Alberta, to do my infantry school.
And so, how was infantry school? Did you find it challenging coming from a high school? And how old were you as well?
I was 19 years old at that time. Yeah,
And
and
so,
yeah,
was it challenging for you, or?
yeah, there was components of infantry school, so DP1 as it's referred to now, or soldier qualification. Yeah, there was components of it that was challenging for sure. There was some physical demands that up until that point I never experienced before. But there's also the challenge that you know being away from home for the first time for a significant amount of time was a challenge. Interacting with people from all sorts of different walks of life and different backgrounds was different. I grew up around guys that play a lot of sports, but I also had friends that were academics. So growing up as a kid in the high school that I went to, I was very fortunate where I had groups of friends that I could hang out with that were very, very different and very diverse. And that did help me when I was at infantry school, but I did find that being intermixed, in Wainwright, Alberta, for 5 straight months with the same group of guys doing the same thing in and out with no real control over anything that was coming our way. That was a challenge. It was always just you're responding to what's being told, and what's being directed of you. And yeah, that was a challenge for sure.
Yeah. And did you enjoy it, or how was it on your mental? Like as a 19-year-old,
Yeah,
you're a
as a 19
soldier.
year old, I absolutely loved it. I loved every component of it, the challenge of it. Like I said, hanging out with different people, getting to know people, really building bonds with folks that were of like-minded individuals, and I really enjoyed it. I like the culture of the army where you eat at a certain time, you do PT at a certain time. There's performance objectives and checks that had to be done every week or every so often. It was structured, and I liked the structure, and I liked what the army was challenging me with. So yeah, I was embracing it with everything.
Awesome. And so, how did it look like the first few years that you were in the military? What did you do? What were your ambitions? Where were you going?
Yeah, so it's a really good question because here's a story that I haven't had an opportunity to share with too many people. But during infantry school, so I'm in Wainwright, Alberta, and we started in January, and I think we graduated in May. So in Wainwright in January, February, it's pretty cold. It can be pretty harsh. And at that time, for an example, like this was a pivotal moment in my career early, to the point where I didn't really fully understand the weight that it had until later. But there was a component of physical exertion that we were going through. We were doing a platoon march, rucksack march with platoon support weapons. So within the platoon, we had Carl Gustav rocket launchers. We had light machine guns. We had crew served machine guns, and we were carrying all of that equipment. And I don't remember the exact distance that we were covering, but it was about 8 or 10 kilometers with a lot of heavy equipment. So it was a grind for sure. And I remember there was always a truck trailing. There was always this truck that was in the back, and it would collect the people that would either fall out or you know get hurt or just have a bad day and kind of quit on that day. But the problem with that was these people would get on the truck and they're part of your team, so you want to help them, but sometimes those folks didn't necessarily want to be helped. They were just looking for an outlet. And this particular rucksack march, what I remember is I remember carrying the C6 at the time. So C6, for those that are not familiar, it's a it's a cruise serve weapon. So there's a number one and there's a number two, but it's a weapon that a number one can handle on his own. But it's a heavier gun, and it becomes cumbersome and a bit of a drag to carry for a long duration of time. So that was my responsibility for that particular rucksack march. But my fire team partner at the time, that person was carrying a 84. So an 84 rocket launcher, Carl Gustav, is a big, heavy piece of equipment as well. And I remember when that individual went on the truck, the instructors that were running that rucksack march at the time kind of stopped everybody and said, well, that piece of equipment is not going on the truck. It needs to come with the platoon. So you guys figure out who's carrying it. And I remember a moment where lots of people were kind of looking around or looking down, hoping that they weren't going to be the ones that were going to get picked. And I remember saying, well, somebody's got to carry it, so I'll take it. So now I got a Carl G and I got a C6. And it was about 10 minutes after I made that decision, I realized that was a terrible decision, because now I'm carrying an 84 and a C6. And I don't know, at that point, I don't know how long we're walking for, but I know it sucks. And, just keep my head going, or keep my feet going, keep my head down, just doing what I need to do, one foot in front of the other. And at the end of that march, there was a master corporal who he kind of didn't really pull me aside, but he came up to me and, in a quiet kind of approach, he said, have you ever thought about trying out for JTF2? And at that point, I had never heard of JTF2, to be completely honest. And I said to him, I said, sorry, Master Corporal, I don't know what you're talking about. And he kind of poked some fun at me. He's like, what, Private Turner, what do you get your head in the sand? Like, you living under a rock? What do you mean you don't know what JTF2 is? And I didn't at that time. I just was oblivious. I had no idea that a unit like that even existed in Canada. But what it did was it dropped a seed of interest, because he didn't have to say that. In fact, most people probably would have avoided giving any type of feedback whatsoever, let alone positive feedback. Because what he said to me was, he said, you should consider trying out when you're done with infantry school and you get to battalion. He said, you should consider trying out for JTF2. He said, I think you have some attributes that they would be looking for. And I said, okay, sure, it sounds good. And then, of course, from that point forward, I got a little bit more interested. Who's this JTF2 and what do they do and who are they? As I asked a few questions and did a little bit of research, then I became really interested in what JTF2 was. So it was a real pivotal moment in early stages of my career as a young infantry soldier, for sure.
Oh, awesome. And how many years did it take you to build yourself up to get to the level where, okay, I'm ready to go and try out now for JTF2?
Sure.
What was it?
So that's a good question, because I was really fortunate when I got to battalion in 1999, and I was at 2nd Battalion PPCLI. Within the first year that I was there, we deployed to Bosnia. Bosnia was just closing down at that point. So 2000, 2001, deployed to Bosnia as a young private, had an opportunity for my first deployment, which is pretty exciting. And then came back from that deployment. And then I think about 8 months, maybe 9 months later, we spooled up for the first tour in Afghanistan. So a company from our battalion joined the 3rd Battalion Battle Group, and we were the first boots on the ground in Afghanistan in 2002. So I was really fortunate to get 2 tours under my belt in a relatively early stage. And it was during the deployment in Bosnia that I first saw JTF2 operators and assaulters doing their job. And I thought, oh man, okay, this is different, and they were very easy to talk to. They were very open, great people just to have general conversations with. And then fast forward, so that was 2001 in Bosnia, and then fast forward 2002 in Afghanistan, again had exposure to some JTF2 assaulters in Afghanistan. And then I knew at that point, I said, okay, that's what I want to do. That's where I want to be. So it was in Afghanistan that I started to train and really strongly consider trying out for JTF2. When I got back from Afghanistan, I put in my information. So now it's referred to as an NOI, a notice of intent. At that time, simply what would happen is you would handwrite your memo of intention, send that to your section commander at the time, and then he would help facilitate the administration process. Well, long story short, as a young private, I wasn't fully aware of the administration process. So the first year, the deadline had come and gone, and I missed my opportunity. And I'm not blaming my section commander, because it was on me to follow up with the administration, but I didn't fully understand the process at the time. So the first year, I missed the deadline, and I missed that opportunity. So you learn from it, no big deal. The second year, I stay on top of it, put my information forward, write all of the proper memos that are required, and then follow up on them. And then a week before I was supposed to go to selection, so I had everything in order, everything was squared away. I had my selection date, and then a week before I was supposed to go, I used to race ATVs when I lived in Winnipeg, and I shouldn't have been out on my bike a week before going on selection, but I was, and I rolled the bike and I broke my wrist. So I show up at my final interview with the BPSO before heading off to selection with a cast on my hand. And I remember looking at the BPSO at the time, and the look on the individual's face was priceless. They kind of thought, "What are you doing here?" And I said, "Well, this just happened last night, but I'm sure I'll be fine. In 2 weeks' time, I'll be good to go." And they stopped it there. Said, "No, sorry, you gotta get healthy, and then maybe come back next year." So that was the second year. Fast forward the third year, now I have a good grasp on what's going on. It's my third year in battalion now, or fourth year would have been at that point. And now I'm focused and ready to do what I need to do to try out for JTF2. So the fourth year in battalion, and then the third attempt, I was successful enough to do selection, and luckily I got through it the first attempt, and then I got picked up for SOAC in January 2004.
Awesome. So what were you going through? Like, let's start talking about like selection. Like when you got the news that you were going on selection, was there any like fear, excitement? What emotions were going through you? Like what were you feeling?
I was super excited for sure when I got the message, and I got to receive those dates of selection, basically go time. I was super excited, and very, very nervous as well, because all my life I was told, I played competitive hockey growing up as a kid, but I was always told I was too small, or not big enough, or I was always told something that was a deterrent or an obstacle to get in the way of achieving goals. And this circumstance was no different. There were people who were naysayers within the battalion who would say stuff like, "You don't have enough experience, you're not old enough, you're not big enough," and I use that as motivation. I use that as fuel to the fire. So I was excited to go, and I was determined to show what I was capable of, and what I was eventually gonna do. And yeah, so the mixture of emotions were definitely a little bit of apprehensive, definitely some nerves, and a little bit of questioning. There was a little bit of questioning, like, do I have what it takes? I don't know. But once I got there, I remember at that point we had 3 days in advance, so 3 days before selection started, where they ran us through a bunch of testing, and they were doing some biometric markers on basic human performance protocols. And they put us on that was the first time I had ever exposure to a VO2 max machine. And I remember them putting me on this machine with a mask stuck to your face, and then they put a treadmill at a certain incline at a certain speed, and then they, slowly increase the incline to the point where, you cannot go anymore. And I didn't know at the time, because you're just a number. They tell you to do this run, go until we tell you to stop, and then you get off the treadmill, but they don't give any feedback. So how did that go? I don't know. I later found out, after selection was done, that my VO2 score max, VO2 max scores were the equivalent of a elite athlete. Now, what does an elite athlete look like? I don't know, but what they told me was some of my numbers were comparable to an Olympic athlete. So I only share that story because when I prepared for selection, I prepared for the hardest thing that I was ever going to endure. And just when I thought I was fit enough, I trained harder. So when I did get to selection, there was one thing that I was 100% confident in. It was my conditioning wasn't going to be the thing that held me back. So leading up to selection, very excited, but I was also very determined and very prepared.
Awesome. And was it days that you were like, this is too hard, or like any doubts in your head that you might not make it physically? You were tired and you wanted to stay in and stuff, or every day you were just go, go, go?
When I was on selection, you mean?
And not on selection, before selection, when training up to like getting yourself ready for it.
Yeah, in preparation, yeah, there was days, there was a lot of dark days where, the grind, the training was so regimented where, I would do certain things every single day almost at the same time. And sometimes you didn't feel like doing it, just I was, low on energy or under recovered or whatever the scenario might have been. There was days for sure that I didn't feel like training. And whenever those days or whatever those components of the day start to enter into my head, the way I would kind of push it away, or persevere through it, I would say to myself, well, if I really want to be a special forces assaulter, like there are no days off. Like every day I have to do something. There's no excuses. Like I need to find a way to push through. I need to find a way to persevere. So even at an early young stage in my life, I had a work ethic that I don't really know where that came from, other than my folks. I had two, hardworking mom and a hardworking dad that set good examples for me. And I think I used that to help create the trajectory that I needed for that type of output of energy.
Yeah. So my question here comes to you is this: that as you mentioned that in school you weren't thriving, but you had this hard work behind this. So what made the difference between, you would say yourself now that you're an adult and you have many years of experience, what was the difference between you in school and you in the military? What made you thrive in the military?
A few things. Like I always knew and I believed in my intelligence. I knew I was a smart guy. I was not stimulated by academics. I wasn't stimulated by flipping pages through textbooks in fields that I didn't find overly interesting. But I knew I was smart, and I just had to find a way to kind of channel the intelligence and find something I was really interested in. And I think the Army did that for me for a couple of reasons. The thing I really like about the Army is the camaraderie and the togetherness. And I think there was a lot of that helped motivate me. And there was a lot of requirement to be physically capable to do a lot of different things within the Canadian Armed Forces and in the Army specifically. So I thrived on that. I really liked, being the top third in physical fitness. I really liked being the top third in performance. And every time I did a course or I was involved with something, I wanted to be amongst the top three in everything that I did. So I was constantly driven to be at the top in everything that I did. I was a super competitive guy. I still am. So I think the Army allowed, or it really harnessed, a competitive nature and a competitive mindset. It didn't, in the early days in the Army, from my recollection, there was never any conversations about, everybody was the same and everybody is equal. Like there was none of that. It was, no, man, if you have the edge, then show us. And if you want to be at the top, then you work for it. And then, you're going to get it. But there was never, from my memory, there was never ever like, just show up and you're all going to be treated the same. So I think to answer your question, the army gave me things that I was looking for, and it challenged me in ways that really made me tick.
Yeah. And so let's look at now the selection. Now you're in selection, going through your days, and like, was it any time where you were like, "Oh man, I made a mistake here"? Like, they like, holy crap, because yeah, like, what is this, right?
Oh yes, yeah. So I'll share two stories from selection, that I'm not giving anything away, but people will appreciate what was going through my head. So it's the special forces, right? So there's a component of phobia testing that they're going to run you through. That's pretty much a given, right? So whether or not you're comfortable with heights, or whether or not you're comfortable with enclosed spaces, or whether or not you're comfortable with water. Well, I thought my level of comfort in water was higher than what it was. So maybe it was wrongfully inflated level of confidence with water. And what they put us through on that particular selection, I will never forget. And there was a moment during that particular evaluation where I thought, I don't know if I can continue, and B, I wonder what it's going to be like to open up my eyes being resuscitated on the side of a pool. So those things went through my head. Like I thought for sure I was going to drown, and they were going to have to pump my lungs and get the water out of my lungs in order for me to come back to life. Like it was miserable. I did not perform. I barely survived through that particular iteration of selection. And it remains with me today, and I can look back and smile at it now. But there was a component, yeah, where I was in dark places where I thought, yeah, I'm not cut out for this. Maybe I don't belong to be here. Maybe I should just pack it in. But thankfully I didn't, and thankfully I found a way to push through that stuff.
So it's so funny because like when somebody like is like drowning, their first instinct is get me out of here, right?
Yeah.
What was it for you that you were thinking? What is it gonna feel like getting resuscitated, right? Like where does that mentality come in? Like, okay, I'd rather be resuscitated than.
Well, so and that's what I mean. Like, so I said I'll share two stories with you, but it was from pretty much the same component of exposure, if you will. So just when I thought it was all done, when I thought this particular evaluation was all done, there was more. So I went from, okay, they're gonna have to resuscitate me at some point because there's no way I can take much more of this. And then I remember kind of like crossing a line of acceptance and saying that, and that's when I said, like, I went from contemplation, like I don't think I'm cut out for this. I think this is outside of what I'm capable of. Then making a leap and saying to myself, no, they're going to have to resuscitate me, or they're going to have to remove me. So I had that conversation with myself. I'm like, well, I'm committed, and I know I'm a terrible swimmer. I'm barely doing what I need to do here. I'm hanging on by a thread. But I remember having the short conversation with myself, and I kind of crossed over and said, well, I'm here. So the only way I'm leaving is if they either have to resuscitate me to bring me back to life, or they're going to pull me out of here and say, you know what, this is where it ends for you. Yeah.
Awesome. And so like let's say after the selection, like were you confident that you did like fantastic and you were gonna get picked up, or like what was it like going back to the unit like, after experiencing all that, right? Like what emotions were you going through after that? Like what were you thinking?
Very good question. I was confident that I was not going to get selected. I was pretty confident. I went back to battalion, and guys are super happy for you because you successfully completed the 7 days, where there's a lot of people that attempt and they're unsuccessful. And it's no slight against them. It's just the way it is. And I was very fortunate to get through it on my first attempt. So when I got back to battalion, I had sergeant majors, I had platoon warrants, I had buddies, peers pretty stoked. They're patting me on the back, like, good job, man. Really happy for you. Like, how do you feel? And I was like, I don't know. I don't have a good feeling. I said, I don't think I demonstrated what I'm capable of, and I'm not sure that this one was a success. So I really was not confident that I was going to get selected. And then when the message did come in, I was, as you can imagine, extremely ecstatic and super stoked that they're going to give me a chance to to go on to the special operations assaulter course. So I went from low confidence to very quickly to, holy shit, they actually believe in me. I can do this. You're damn right, I can do this. And then from there I was basically like jet fueled into the next phase.
Awesome. And then on the Salter course, were there any difficulties during there then, or was it a breeze after that? Like, was it like go time for you?
Not at all. So the assaulter course is the marathon. So the 7-day selection phase is it's kind of a sprint before the marathon, and then the marathon is really every day you're learning something new. Every week there's a new performance objective that needs to be met. So we're constantly being assessed, and yeah, there was dark moments. There was components that were a struggle, and there were some components that I did really well in. So there was a lot of ebb and flow throughout from the beginning to the end. Way more challenges than there were easy days for sure. But at the end of the day, it's so rewarding because you're with the same group of guys for basically 9-10 months, right? Day in and day out, the same group of guys. Everybody has good days, everybody has bad days. Your buddies are there to help lift you up when you're having a bad day. Your buddies there to help keep you honest when you start to get a little bit maybe overconfident in certain areas. And just the tight knit camaraderie is one thing that I'll never forget, and it'll always remain with me as one of those positive experiences that definitely 100% had a lot to do with the character that you see today.
Awesome. And like, did you make a lot of mistakes during your selection and your SOIC? Because in my mind, or I could say like a lot of people when they talk about JTF2 and the people who get picked are these perfect people who don't make any mistakes and are these beasts, right? What is your answer to that then?
That's a falsism. Every guy that was on selection with me had dark moments. Every guy that was on SOAC with me had things that he was really, really good at, and he had moments of struggle. Every single guy has those moments, and I can honestly say there isn't one guy that I was fortunate enough to share those experiences with that would not say that. All right. So honest to goodness, there's good and bad with every experience. And assaulters are human beings, man. And we make mistakes just like everybody else. And another myth that needs to be squashed is there's a lot of people out there that believe you need to be 6 foot and 220 pounds of solid muscle to be an assaulter. That's simply not a fact, man. Like, there's myself, for example, I'm 5'6" and 145 pounds, and the majority of the guys that were on course with me were little guys. I would say the average was probably 5'10", 180 pounds. So to squash those myths, you need to be 6'4" and 200 pounds. It's not true. To squash those myths that assaulters are perfect, it's just not true. There's no such thing as perfection. Assaulters are humans just like everybody else. We make mistakes just like everybody else.
What part of I don't know if you can answer this question. What part of the course on the SOAC you liked the most or you enjoyed the most? You were like, okay, fuck yeah, like I enjoyed this part, and like this is what I signed up for
There
most.
was a lot of learning that was really, exciting stuff to learn, like the stuff that you read books about, the stuff that you see videos about, the stuff that you watch in movies. We had an opportunity to do that. So every day, every week was something new and exciting. So it was really tough to kind of like pull one or two experiences out of a massive high volume of just coolness. But I would say the thing that was most exciting or the most fun for me was anything that had to do with CQB, anything that had to do with like dynamic entries or a team fighting concept. That's where I really thrived, and that's where honestly, that's where I felt like the majority of my confidence was built in a CQB environment. So when you're, navigating through, tight spaces with, groups of guys that they learn to read your body language and they understand your movements and they know what you're doing, and you guys, we can communicate without actually using words. It's quite special. It's pretty unique. And I would say those would be some of the highlighting moments that stick out with me from not just my training, but some of my operational time as well.
Awesome. And so after your graduation, now you're a member of the JTF2, the highest point the Canadian military gets to. Um, did the volume, like, because with the military after a course usually the volume either drops or it picks up even more? Was it after that, did the volume drop, or was it go 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 again? uh how did it look like? How was the tempo like
Yeah,
within the unit?
it's a very good question. The tempo is relentless at the unit, and when you're done training, there's, a small segment of a break that you get, which is important. It's kind of like a pressure cooker, right? Where at some point, when the steam pops, that individual that's in the pressure cooker, he needs some time to decompress and to cool off. So we had, I think we had a bit of a summer break, and then we were injected into our with our new teammates. I think it was in the fall, so like September timeframe, and there's probably a day or two maybe where you're taken under the wing by your new team and they kind of let you know where everything is and who's who in the zoo. And then honest to goodness, it's like full throttle. So because you're a junior member, you know there's an onus that's on you to keep your mouth shut, learn as much as you possibly can, ask good questions, and really just try to keep up. So the first year was a lot of learning, because what you do on course isn't necessarily in line with what happens at the unit. Because at the unit, when guys are seasoned and they're doing the job day in and day out, they do things slightly different. They do things way faster. And it was just a lot of learning. So the learning really never really stopped. And in terms of the tempo, no, there was no let up, to be honest. There was components where, busy, 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 maybe plateau a little bit, maybe a bit of a drop, and then busy, busy. But for the most part, from day one of my career to literally 2 weeks before I retired from that particular unit, the tempo was pretty consistent, from beginning to end.
And did that, one of the questions a lot of people ask, and they throw out saying, okay, the tempo runs a lot of people down. Is that a truth or a myth that it, like, because it's such a high tempo,
Yeah,
even the top soldiers feel it at some point?
you're right. There is a lot to be said about recovery and regeneration, and you will never ever hear me say such thing as overtraining. I just don't use it. It's not in my vocabulary. I won't say it. I don't believe in it. I don't believe overtraining is a thing. But I do believe under recovery is 100% a thing. And I do also believe that high performers and high achievers, they will find a way to make things work for a long, long time. But the reality is, unless there is a recovery component built in, like literally built into the schedule, those schedules will be filled. If there's white space in the schedule, it'll be filled. And sometimes that's problem. Well, not sometimes, that can be problematic. And there's no single person that needs to be point to blame. It is a collective agreement. So although that white noise, or sorry, the white space gets filled sometimes by the chain of command, the onus is on the member as well to speak up and have the courage to say, hey man, we've been running hot for the last month. We need a day just to kind of like take the foot off the gas pedal a little bit, maybe sort some kid out, maybe stay home long enough to take my kid to school. That communication needs to be both ways. What I can share from my experience is The tempo was relentless, but I personally loved every minute of it. And as the career, as an individual's career from one year to the next, starts to blend in, before you know it, 5 years, 10 years flies by. And I'll be honest, there is a component in every single man's career where they need to take a break, but sometimes it's very difficult for the individual to put his hand up and say, hey, I need to take a break. So some of that is the accountability of the member, some of that is the accountability of the institution. And I don't know if that answers your question directly, but what I can tell you is, you know, my body has taken a shit kicking, and I have no regrets, but I do believe that it was a combination of high paced tempo at the unit, but also, personally speaking, I had a high paced tempo when I wasn't at work as well, because for 10 years while I was at the unit, I was fighting professionally as well. So that tempo has caught up with me over the last few years, where I now have severe knee issues. I have both of my shoulders. I've had some serious issues, and it's accumulation of wear and tear over time. So it's a really good question, and it's a complex question too. Because if I could share any advice with, future assaulters, I would say, never pass up on an opportunity, because you just never know when another opportunity is going to present itself. But at the same time, you have to be honest with yourself. And if you feel like mentally or physically you're starting to break down a little bit, that doesn't mean you're broken. That doesn't mean that you're not combat effective. That just means you need to take a break. And for everybody, that can be different. Maybe that break looks like a day. Maybe that break looks like a month. It's a little bit different. But the reality is, if we decide to take a break, that means somebody else has got to pick up the slack. So it's a tough trade-off. It's a tough thing to put your hand up and say, hey, man, I need to take a break, because if that one man is taking a break, that means two other men have got to pick up the work for that one man's, absence. So that's a real tough. It's a tough thing to navigate. It's a real tough thing to balance, but it's legit. And if we're thinking about, you know, projected long-term longevity, we have to think about long game. We have to think about not just our mental state, but our physical state. Can we do this job for 15 years? And if we're going to, what do we have to do? What do we have to do in the early days? Put things in place so we can be mentally strong and physically capable to go into the 15th year or the 16th year and so on. So I think that's a habitual behavioral trait that would start early into an assaulter's career, and then it would become his way or the way to really deal with the amount of tempo that he's going to have to deal with.
Yeah, and so like, what do you miss from like all this? Like, all after you decided to retire, when you look back and like, or when some of the days that you wake up, what do you say? Oh, I miss that. I miss that part of.
I miss two things. I miss the camaraderie. I miss the boys. I miss getting after it every day, training hard, poking fun at each other, having a lot of fun and have a few laughs. I miss that tight knit community. And a second close is I miss deployments. I miss doing the job. I was very fortunate where the majority of my combat experience came in Afghanistan. So the amount of time that I was fortunate enough to spend in Afghanistan, I absolutely loved it. And that's where I grew the most as a man. That's where I grew the most as a soldier and as an assaulter. So I miss that. I miss deployments, and I miss the guys for the most part.
So it's interesting. You say you grew most in Afghanistan. Without any sharing any details, um, like how did you grow as a person? Like what made you being in that environment that is stressful, that got you, okay, this is what I enjoy, this is where I like to be, right? It's stressful environment, is dangerous, there is a potential you can't come home, right? So what was it that you were like, okay, I like being here?
Well, when we, like the assaulters or even just a soldier in the regular force, for example, we know what we're getting into, and we know that there's the reality of a potential circumstance that could come to the surface at some point. Now, whether or not people decide to take that seriously and really have that hard conversation with themselves in the mirror, that's individually based. I know me personally, when I first joined the military, I was the guy that believed, all the slogans, be all that you can be, and, you know, army first, mission, mission first, self last. I believed all of that and I was all in all the time. So when I was deployed, every time I deployed, I knew I took a deep breath knowing that I might not come back. But I also knew if there was something that was going to take me from this world, it was something that I could be proud of and something that I could truly believe that I was doing good. And and I believed that I was. I believed that I was, with the right people trying to instill and inflict the right outcome given the circumstances that we were in those particular situations. So I believed in it. I believed in, I believed in the mission. I believed in, I believed my moral and values and my ethics were in line with what it was that I was expected to do. And there was no question that if the unfortunate was to come to the surface, I had already accepted it.
Mm. So, to clarify that, so every time that you went on deployment, you had accepted the fact that you could one potentially not come home.
Yes. Yeah. So I kind of have that conversation with myself, and think of it from the perspective, well, we all got to go at some point, and I would much rather go fighting than, you know, there's a saying that I share with people sometimes, and I think it's a double-edged sword because it's kind of like initiative. You have a good idea, you have a good initiative. Well, it might be a good idea for you, but it might not always be the greatest idea for the collective group. So I kind of live by a mantra where I would much rather do something and then wish I didn't than wish I or not do something and wish I did. Right. So that's kind of the mantra that I live
Awesome.
by. So it helped me. Everybody dealt with things differently, but that's what worked for me. And I always just I treated it like it's my duty, it's my job. Um, I tried not to get too emotionally attached to anything that I was doing, but I loved every minute of it.
During your process, did you have any mentors to guide you through it, or did you do it all by yourself, or like getting towards like training like that and knowing what to do? Like, was it by your own research, or was it like a mentor who guided you, like being like, okay, Randy, this is the better option to do?
A little bit of both. I was very fortunate. I had some great guys surrounding me. Um, older guys, younger guys that have done the job before me. That they provided great advice and they gave some recommendations on certain experiences that maybe I wasn't familiar with. So I definitely had some maybe not formal mentors, but I definitely had some good people around me that provided some good advice from time to time. Um, and then I also learned a lot by making a lot of mistakes. And the reason I made a lot of mistakes is because I was always willing to try. I was always willing to put myself out there, do something that was completely outside of what I would consider to be normal for me. And I was okay with that. So I think to answer your question, there was a little bit of mentorship from having such a great opportunity to work with, really high quality dudes. And then there was also components of myself, just my character, willing to try something new. And if I made mistakes, which I did, I made a lot of mistakes, learning from those experiences and then kind of hoisting that stuff aboard. So when future situations happen, I was like, yeah, I've been here before. So I had a little bit more reliable, reasonable information to draw upon.
Yeah, and so have you seen change in the military from when you were in the unit and everything? Has the unit changed? Has the military in general has changed the way they look at things? Has it changed a lot, or?
100%. It's changed dramatically in the last 5 to 7 years. I saw a lot of changes that I don't believe are necessarily good changes. And for those who know me well, I'm a realist. Yes, I'm very optimistic, but I'm a realist. I don't dwell on the negative, and I'm not certainly here to shit on anything about the military. But I do believe that there have been some significant changes in the last 5 to 7 years that are are they're sucking the motivation, and it's making it hard for soldiers to be motivated, to stay motivated. And I'll give you an example. From what I saw over the last little while, there is way more emphasis put on, you know, workplace rights, you know, treating people with respect and dignity, op honor, distance learning, like all of these things that are in place that basically suggest to teach humans how to be good human beings. And what it has deterred the military from is promoting a warrior like mindset and really encouraging warriors to be warriors. And I think it's softened the Canadian Armed Forces, and it's a problem that I think is a systemic problem from society. If you think about it, there are components of our society that will try out for some component of the military. So whatever military member is fulfilling a specific job detail, well, they were yesterday, they were a part of our society. So where I'm going with that is I think now the pendulum has swung so far to one side where the main focus is not treating people with disrespect, which the fact that we even have to teach this is mind boggling. Why somebody in uniform would treat somebody else in uniform with disrespect blows me away. But if you look at it, why would you treat another human being with disrespect? There's no requirement for it. You can be a warrior, but you can also exercise some empathy and some compassion to the fact that we are not all the same. We are all very, very different, and different is a good thing. So I think if we were to focus a little less on equality of humans and rather promote a healthy competitiveness, competitive cooperation with some competition is a good thing. So I think if we continue to promote that, what you're going to have is those who want to be high achievers, they're going to have an avenue to achieve highly. Those who just want to cash a paycheck and coast, they're going to get left behind, and they're going to get left into the shadows. So it's going to be up to them to up their game, polish the boots, take care of the uniform, shave their face, show that they're willing to do a little bit extra if they want to get recognized for doing a specific job really well. Because I think what's happening is people in uniform, they don't really care about taking care of themselves or their uniform, because the way they look at it is they're going to get paid anyway. So they're just coasting. In the military, and I know I'm oversimplifying this, which I'm certainly not trying to, but I think the military has now catered to everybody's the same, everybody's equal, everybody deserves the same exposure to everything. That's not true. That's simply just not factual. So to answer your question, and I hopefully I'm not ranting too much, but I have seen some changes. I don't necessarily think it's necessarily for the good, but I also don't believe that it's going to be here forever. I think the pendulum will eventually swing back, and we need to promote warriors. If like, I'll share this story with you. There are guys that I know right now that are currently active at the unit who are doing good work, and they are eliminating shitheads that do not deserve to be on this earth, and that is not being celebrated. And to me, that's a shame. There are guys with serious trigger time, and I can't speak on their behalf, but what I can tell you is I'm not one of those guys. Like, I've had the great opportunity conduct almost 70 DAs of operations while I spent time in Afghanistan, but I was never involved in any heated tick. I was never involved in any firefight, and it's just the way it worked out. that was my experience. My experience is not the same as everybody else. There is a lot of guys at the unit who I know who've got serious trigger time and have done some real good work, and they've eliminated shitheads who are no longer on this earth because of the work that they did. And unfortunately, it's not being celebrated. And to me, that's a shame. I think it should be celebrated. The guys that I've had the opportunity to work with, they don't need medals to strap across their chest. They don't need accolades that they can put up on the wall, but they do deserve to be recognized and acknowledged for the good work that they're doing. And I don't believe that's happening. I believe those warriors are being suppressed, and then all the other folks that believe they have this right to be treated the same just because they wear the same uniform is ridiculous. And it's unfortunate because it's sucking the life out of some of these good warriors to the point where they're shrugging their shoulders, and they're actually saying words like, why do I bother? Nobody gives a fuck, which is a shame, because I know personally I give a fuck, and I support those guys 100% that are doing the good work, but it's not being celebrated. It doesn't get shared. It doesn't get shared publicly, and I think that's a shame. The unit does a really good job. They're very proud, quiet professionals, but I think in some cases it's at a detriment to the unit. I think if some of these good stories get shared about what the guys are actually doing, not only is it going to motivate others to want to try out, but it's going to help recruiting. It's going to help guys, think twice about contemplation and actually get after it and do something about it. So yeah, I mean, it's a long-winded answer. I do see a lot of changes in the military, not necessarily for the good, but I also see a lot of positive in the military too. So, I'm not on anybody's payroll, but I tell you, I'm actively recruiting for the unit and for the Canadian Armed Forces, because it is a very special, unique place to seek employment. And I think anybody that is in their early 20s that are contemplating a life in the military, they should follow through with it 100%. They should give it a try and see what they're all about.
And I'm gonna add to that as well. Me joining the military, to be honest with you, I didn't know anything about JTF2 either, right? Like nobody talks about it. Everybody just says it's a uber duper secret unit that nobody talks about, right? And then I don't know if this is a good comparison, but then we see the Navy SEALs on the other hand, right? Or that the US is just pumping ads on it, and you see the difference of the volume of the people who are interested, because there are people who are interested out there to be warriors. They want to give it a try, right? And I agree with you. I was talking to my colleagues the other day about this, that the Canadian Armed Forces is very good at keeping their mouths shut, which is good. But at the same time, even us who are in the military, we don't know what does JTF2 does. We don't know what does CSOR do. Like all these, we have all these units, but we have no idea what they do.
Yeah.
And I would say, like, if somebody is gonna go for that, they're like, it would make it really hard for them to do any research and to really know what they're going for until they're at the doorsteps, at least.
Yeah.
Right. And I think, like, even if you compare to the SAS, SPS, they got a history, and like I've done research because I like the history of the Canadian military, and like the operations and all that. It's interesting to me. It's my country. I want to know more about it. But there's not much about JTF2, and I know, like, because like I hear stories that our military is very professional, and I know we've done some good work, but I don't know what kind of good work we've done, right? And you're right. I think eventually it should be shared somehow, and hopefully that happens. But I don't know what would be in your opinion, what would be the best way to shine light on the unit, but not giving too much away?
Yeah, that's a really good question, because I know, media media has their own agenda, and whatever story that they're trying to pitch is, the story will be manipulated or adjusted to meet that agenda. I get that. I understand that. I think, a Canadian citizens have a right to know that the unit exists and that the unit does good work. The details are not important. The details of what the guys are doing, I believe, is not important, not that important. But what I do believe is guys that are doing the job, they deserve recognition for doing it. And they're a human being, just like everybody else. So they don't necessarily want to be praised, and they don't need a parade and be highlighted for their accolades. They don't even want that. But they do deserve a pat on the back, and they do deserve that recognition, especially from internal, with other organizations in the Canadian Armed Forces, to know that these guys are doing a good job. They're doing great work, and they're doing good jobs overseas. And there is so much more that we could be doing domestically, let alone overseas. But the reality is, it becomes so secretive, and the guys are, you know, part of an institution with a culture that you need to be a quiet professional all the time. And I agree with that. I agree with that to a point, though, to a point, because if it never gets out there of some of the jobs and some of the good work that the guys are doing, then they'll lose, in some cases, not always, generally speaking, of course, they will lose their faith in why they're doing what they're doing. Right. So if it cannot be celebrated, at some point, they're going to blow fish kisses and shrug their shoulders and be like, why am I doing this? Like, why do I keep putting myself at risk? Why do I keep putting my family through hell? And nobody knows about it. Nobody gives a shit about it, which is unfortunate. It's not true, because people, like myself, and, I don't want to speak for you, but I'm willing to believe, like, you care. There's other people who care. And, I think there's ways that we can communicate the good stuff that's being done without necessarily, writing a book or making a movie about it with fine details. It's not what I'm suggesting. But I think more conversations like this need to be had. I think that answers your question. Like, sure, there could be the power of a good story written, but the media's got its own attention, so you've got to be cautious with that. I wish I had a better answer, but I think just being comfortable with having these conversations a little bit more openly is a good thing.
Good start. Awesome. So I don't want to drag this interview for a long time now. So a couple of things that you wanted to, like, maybe address one more time. What would you want to tell somebody who's going for those units, or who has ambition within the military? What would you tell them? What would you want to tell the military ourselves, and then the society itself? Like, what are these?
I would say, I would start with, if somebody came to me and they said, I want to join the Canadian Armed Forces, I'd say, awesome. All right, let me help you. What do you want to do? And I would really encourage them to be a critical thinker and do some research. Like, what do you want to do? What could you see yourself being proud of doing? And I think there's a lot of people in uniform right now who are doing a job that they're not super proud of. They don't love it. But rather than doing something about it and improving the situation that they're in, they become stagnant. And I think that's a problem. That's problematic. So be proud of what it is that you're doing, no matter what the job is. If you stock shelves for the Canadian Armed Forces, but in your view, that job is not that important, that's bullshit. Your job is important. And if your job is to stock shelves, be the best damn stock shelfer that you can possibly be. That's what I would tell people. Whatever your job is, be proud of it. Be proud of that thing. Know that you are making a difference, and be the best at it. Be the best that you possibly can. And then I would say, if you feel unfulfilled, do something about it. Nobody is going to come to you and say, sorry, you look unhappy. Is there something that I can do for you? That's just not reality. If you want something done, you need to do it yourself. You need to take action and improve your circumstances. That's what I would share with people. For those folks that are in uniform already and they're seeking life in the special forces, I would say, again, do your homework. What do you want to do? Because the job detail of a CGIRU operator is very different than a CSOR operator, which is very different than a JTF2 assaulter. So I would say, do your homework, find out what it is that you truly want to do. And if there are specific questions that you hope to have answered, Ask questions. Ask questions. The worst case scenario is somebody's going to say, sorry, I can't answer that question for right, wrong, or indifferent reasons. And that's okay. But be willing to ask questions and be willing to educate yourself so you know what it is that you're getting yourself into. Because the CANSOF umbrella, when people say Canadian Special Forces, they don't fully understand what that means. There are many avenues with the Canadian Special Forces. So I would say encourage or endeavor to educate yourself and figure out what it is that you truly want to do. And then the last component I would say to give any advice would be always have a plan B. So, life is unfair and situations will happen where we all need to adapt, we need to persevere, overcome, find ways to work around, and accept the fact that not everything is going to work out on your first attempt. So I would say have a plan B. If this is what you really want to do, put your heart and soul into it and look to achieve that thing, but also have a plan B. If this doesn't work out, okay, what else can I do? Right. And I think, that could be life. Sorry, some advice for life in general. But for those who are seeking employment in the Canadian Armed Forces, seeking a career in special forces, I would say ask questions, do your homework, and know what you're getting yourself into.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Randy, for this awesome interview. And yeah, have a great night.
My pleasure. Thanks, Kazra. Thanks for reaching out. Thanks for connecting. And as always with the YouTube channel, there's a lot of people out there that have been reaching out the last little while with some really, really good questions. Keep it coming. Kazra has prepared these questions. I'm sure there's other guys out there that have similar questions or a variation of some of these questions. So please feel free to reach out. If it's within the realm of what I'm, capable of talking about, I'll definitely address these questions. And if it's not, then I'll politely tell you I can't answer it, and I'll give you reasons why. So thanks a lot, Kazra. I really appreciate it. Keep in touch. And for all the viewers out there, keep fit, remain strong, and always stay in the fight.